Questions that probably some of you have already on your mind. So the first question, and we don't have a certain order, right? So you can answer regardless. You're sitting on the chairs, and the first question is. How does it impact the organizational performance, the quality of the selection process? Is any correlation between how we select, who we get on board, and the bottom line? Are there any moderators? Is it just about the people or other factors? So how it is connected, the quality of the selection with the outcome in the organization? And maybe the second question is there a market of the candidates in Romania or in other countries? Do we do any selection at all? So what are your thoughts about this? And in Europe, of course, that will be for the two of you. Juana.
I think there is no question that there is an important relationship between these two concepts, and of course that the quality of candidates will influence our work relationship, our relationship with our clients, the experience of our clients, and the selection process is tremendously important. And we saw already that the tools that we use are also very important. And there is a market of candidates. Again, we have to be there. We have to be where the candidates are. And for that we, as organization, as leaders, as employees, as clients, we have somehow to inspire them, to attract them, and make them join us. It's also about the context. We see a different context, and we saw it in the last years in Romania, at least. I don't know in other countries, maybe in Hungary or.
Okay. So any other comments? How do you see? Is any change in Europe and in Romania in terms of the labor market? Candidates are different. Companies are looking for another type of people. So what can you comment on this? Attracting candidates and selecting them.
I would say there is not much difference based on my experience. We were trying to find salespeople for our team in the Czech Republic. The position has been vacant since last October. We still don't have anyone. So I guess if it's difference, then it's only to the worst outside of Romania. But I think the war for talent is super intensive.
Well, if I can add on for the Romanian perspective, I'm only in Romania, but I can see indeed a war of talent increasing. I think I discussed it with some of you before the event, and you're all facing this situation with finding people, attracting them, and after that keeping them. So it's a very hot topic in Romania. And I will just add that doing a lot of offices in Romania, we can see the stress of our clients in building an office that really can attract the talents. They are really making an effort to build a scenario of recruitment for the interviews and showing them the office as an aspect of attracting them. And we'll talk maybe later about how it's developed in terms of design, but there's really a stress on attracting the talents, on the recruitment.
How much does organization put emphasis on how the working space is built as an element for attraction? Is any studying this? Does it matter?
So I don't want to hijack the panel, but according to the last PwC CEO report, after money, it's the work environment that is a decision factor for any newcomers to join an organization, any organization. And I'm not sure about how you are interviewing. What I see in many occasions is that the interview process is a very formal process. The candidate goes into a meeting room, there is a desk. On one side it's the HR person, on the other side it's the candidate. It's already a stressful environment, and I know that there are moments when we really want to do stress interviews, but in most of the time, as we heard in the earlier conversations, it's super important what is the culture fit between the organization and the candidate. And I think what you want to get out from an interview is really this culture fit. And you don't get this culture fit if the person is feeling a barrier in between you and him or herself. So I think thinking about creating a different interview room, sitting in two sofas next to one another, having a conversation, is again a tool that we could consider to attract talents.
Okay, Jean?
And just going back to the first question, I'm still starting with that. Or maybe summarizing it all from a global perspective, because I think what we have to obviously realize that we don't have a Romanian, a Hungarian, a German job market, we have a job market globally. I mean, definitely European Union, we have one job market, and we're not only competing against the companies in Timisoara, but against Brussels. And that's one thing we sometimes forget. So it's no more one job market, it's all united together, and it's unfortunate it always goes down to competitiveness. If we are going to be able to pay more, we are more competitive. If we are able to pay less, we are less competitive. And that's the downside of the whole thing. More than that, using tools and using a real good, really cool process in terms of finding, even under these circumstances, the best candidates is not anymore a pleasure or luxury, it's a must. Because all of your competitors are doing it already. And if whoever is not doing it, they're going to miss it. 66% of the Nordic companies doing it on a day-to-day basis. UK, Brexit or not Brexit, they even do it more or a higher level. So it's not really about lamenting if I should use it or not, but use it immediately, because yet again, also part of the story, part how you make the candidate process. What is the circumstances of the interview? What are the circumstances of the hiring process? Those are not competing with the locals anymore. Especially, of course, when we focus largely on white collar workers, but also as we see it in blue collar workers as well. So that's I think the most important to remember. The competition is more fierce, larger, and they are already there.
So it's not only narrowed down to this geography or, yeah, okay.
But, I mean, just to one additional point, the good news is that it seems to be that the competencies and the methods used and focused that are almost universal. So I'm having the same questions in a panel in London, in Lisbon, or in Denmark. There's no differences anymore. Ideas and thoughts are floating much quicker. The level of implementation is a little bit different. Then maybe we can say that in some companies, in some sectors, we see much more leap forward. Telecommunication is typically. I mean, like what Tamás mentioned in his speech, the example of robotization in telco, absolutely. They are absolutely top-notch. Maybe in some other industries, they are a little bit more behind.
Okay. We talked about what matters when you attract candidates. Any comments from the audience? So the panelists talked about the environment, the working space, the fact that the market is global, the fact that we need to pay attention to culture, to some core competencies for the employees. Any other comments with respect to how can we improve the selection process in order to get better organizational results? Okay. If not, yeah, please. Mm-hmm. Or comments, if you have, or sharing your own experience.
We were talking about tools helping the recruiting. What kind of tools do you have to measure the cultural compatibility? If culture is so important, so we have to find people who will fit into our culture. And every company has a different culture.
I might answer, because actually in the leader focus you have the MBPI, for instance, from our perspective, the multi-values preferences. So in terms of recruitment, we can look into the values of each candidate and then translate back into the terminology of your own culture. As an example, if you have a high-performing culture, if everything that matters is hitting results, for instance, and objectives, then probably you need people with higher scores in power. Okay.
I want to build a bit about what you said. Besides just finding out what are the preferences of the candidates and seeing their kind of culture, motives, preferences, that sort of thing, you can also think about the leadership impact on culture, because the leaders that you have that impact on culture. And going back to what Tamás was saying, when you have an interview, the candidate can perceive that impact. So if you have that barrier, they can see, okay, this might be more and more traditional environment, more authoritative environment. But if you remove that barrier, they're thinking, okay, maybe they have leaders that are more kind of looking toward the future and more modern. So also kind of assessing and trying to figure out what kind of leadership you have can make a difference in assessing the culture of the company. Does that make sense?
So the next question that I would have, we talked about attraction, but what about retention, engagement and retention? So is any practical solutions that you might share with the audience in answering the question, how can we be sure that people stick with us more? Any practical tips and tricks or thoughts? Is it, I think, a question that maybe many of you have. How do you ensure that we have a good retention in the organization, right? Because that would be also a sign of maybe of engagement, not equivalent, but yeah. So any practical?
So
Yeah.
I have the mic, but as I said, I'm not an HR consultant, so most of you know it much better than I do, but what I hear is that the reason why retention is becoming so important, that's retention is the best acquisition tool for talent. You really need to keep your talents rather than recruiting new ones. And what we see is that the work environment, as I said before, it's not just attracting, but it's also retaining talents. If you allow people to work the way they want, and if you allow them to control their work experience, that is something that is going to keep them happy. That's when their emotional well-being is super high, and that's when they will feel good, and that's when they will not even think about leaving or rejecting any headhunter's calls.
So the way I see it in the companies nowadays is indeed they want to make the employees happy. It's about well-being, indeed, but it goes beyond that, and it's a management, and also it's about the environment you are putting them in. But it's really the happiness that is now the focus, the happiness of the employees, and by that it's simple things like, okay, celebrating birthdays and other events which will make them happy, like being at the office, having the possibility to have a rest, time to reflect. So all kind of tools that are put in place in order for the employee to be happy. Also, we saw a lot tools to put them at interaction in an informal way, and that is also emphasized a lot on nowadays offices. Like we talk about the work cafe. Work cafe becomes the central place of an office right now, where people come, have a coffee, but discuss and are quite creative and therefore more efficient somehow. And that's also for them a source of engagement to the company. They see that they can have fun, they can be happy at the company, they are happy to go, they are even happier than to stay home. That's also having a homey style in the office makes them feel happier, and that has certainly an impact on their engagement and performance.
So that's a very interesting topic. Do you look for happiness, or I mean, is happiness equivalent with engagement, or maybe we can build? I like very much this idea. Juana.
Always it's a combination, I think, somehow. And following Christoph, somehow it's not only HR, the retention is not only HR job. Actually, it is not HR job. It is the job of all of us, leaders and also colleagues. If I like to work with you, if I like to spend time with you, I will do my best also to spend time together and to keep you in the same team with me. So it's important, and I think it's our self-job. Yes, it's a matter of happiness, because if I am happy when I have not only the financial reward, but also the satisfaction of my job. If I have the sense of belonging, the sense of purpose, we have a common purpose and we share it. We have a higher objective. So I think that this can link us very strong, and together we can somehow conquer the world, if I can say like that.
Let me again unite the different questions together. Number one, it's happiness is very relative and very individual, and we can have an average always. As we say in science, if we torture data enough, it's going to confess sooner or later. Nevertheless, individual approach is very important. But connecting to your question about culture, before we know it's a public phenomenon that leaders create culture, culture creates engagement, engagement creates profit or business unit outcome. This is very important. So we still have to start with the leaders. And although there are loads of specifications which can distinguish your companies, but there are 4 universal competencies which leaders need to process based on our studies, which are very important to create the good culture, the healthy culture, let's put it that way. Because we also know from other surveys that engagement is, and people leaving jobs, certainly influenced by the immediate supervisor or boss. We know that 67% percentile of individuals are active job seekers because they're not happy with what they get. There are even more stuff out there, like 70% of the people would take a pay cut if somebody would fire their boss. Or even there are certain areas, even more brutal stuff are coming out. A survey from Baltimore said that 20% of individuals in a constructing industry is actively fantasizing about killing their own boss. Even in these cases, so it's very brutal. Nevertheless, the leaders only, in brackets, need to focus on 4 areas. One of them, they need to have integrity. So they need to be trustworthy. What am I saying is going to happen no matter what. Second point is competency, which would not only mean that I have general leadership competencies, but I know something about the business itself. The third area is making good judgment, making good calls, making good decisions, which is not easy, and it's not happening every time, but when they're making bad decisions, they're going to be able to get feedback about it, internalize it, and make hopefully better decisions next time. And the fourth element is vision, mission, to giving a compelling vision to the team. If a leader genuinely doing this on a shorter, long-term base, they're going to create the right culture, which likely going to keep most of the individuals. There will be always eager, bigger, unsatisfied individuals, but the most of them will be happy with good judgment, with competency, with integrity, and also with giving a compelling vision.
Okay. So actually, it's definitely what I understand from the comments is that retaining employees is, and I like the comment of Juana, it's a subject on a leader's agenda. It's not only on the HR agenda. Do you agree with this comment? Because sometimes from the practical perspective, managers say, okay, HR has to fix the attrition or HR has to raise the engagement. Actually, it's all of the leaders. And of course, it's very important to tackle down to understand the DNA of the leadership at top level and maybe below, but without disregarding the importance of the environment, because that can foster the culture that we want to create. Questions from the audience? Yes, Diana?
I have a question for Tamas. As I saw this environment and working spaces that you've shown us in the picture that are beautiful, I understood that one person doesn't really have anymore one stable job office place, right?
Not
so
necessarily.
You change places accordingly to the task that you have. You no longer have a fixed table that is yours.
Well, it depends on the organization and then of course the spending of the organization. If the organization can afford to have fixed desks and still allow for creative spaces, then the answer to your question would be no. But in reality, most of the organizations are facing budget issues, and that's when we are saying that anyway we know from our research that the average space utilization in workspaces is between 40 to 60%. So there's a lot of space unused throughout the days, which you can give up and create these creative spaces.
Okay, so one premises for this type of office environment is to have work from home in your policy in organizations, right? Because we, for example, don't have it yet. And we're thinking about switching from the more traditional workspace to this kind of spaces. But I think it's very hard to make this kind of switches. The gap is too big. So first of all, I think we should have a work from home policy and afterwards recreate spaces. Is it necessary to go through this
work from home policy, or we can go straight to work from home and these kind of spaces.
Yeah. So I see a level of excitement from Christoph Glasser, so let me hand over the mic to him.
We'll come back to Tamás to answer that. It just strikes me because it's a hot topic for many companies. And I was in Timisoara yesterday and I talked about it with a large firm that has about 2,000 employees. And they have implemented the work at home, like they're allowing 2 days out of the 5 days to the employees to stay at home. It's due to the wasted time in the transport, family obligations, and it has worked very well for them. And for that, they have also attracted more persons because they knew that they would be staying at home. So, because there's this war on talents, that was one of the solutions, is to let people 2 days out of 5. The flexi time as well. Why not allowing somebody to work from 7 to 4 and some others from 9 to 6? So that is flexi time also as an answer. But there is a way to look at it for your company, is really to study that, to study how your people work, how many people are mostly outside the office, how many would be ready to have flexi time or home office. And then taken from there, you can build a new office, maybe with less space, which is a good cost saving solution. And then the happiness of your employees, because they adapt their schedule to their lifestyle. So it's definitely a hot topic, and I would encourage you to look at it very, very carefully, because it is a great solution okay.
And 2 comments from my side. The first one is that there is no one size fits all. So it depends very much on organization, from organization to organization. And the second thing is that every change is very important, and you know that when you change something, you always get the resistance from the human being as a natural reaction. So you have to be very mindful about what you're doing in terms of change management when you're implementing these solutions.
I have a question regarding this work from home policy. Did you ever consider, like, when, because we hear it a lot for companies thinking about offering this solution to their employees, do you think that maybe there is a hidden problem to this requirement of them for working from home? Maybe, I don't know, they don't feel comfortable over there, they don't have enough spaces, maybe they want to, I don't know, spend their time working on their laptop, relaxing on a sofa, or the environment that their colleagues, they don't really feel that is mixing. I'm just asking if this could be a hidden issue of this working from home. I'm saying this because I work from home for about 3 years with COS and 4 years with another company, and it's not really the best option, but I'm saying, do we consider that maybe the organization doesn't foster all their needs in order for them to excel at coming to work? Or also, okay, we can consider transport, traffic, and all that one, and maybe to offer them the freedom of taking 2-3 hours going to do their tasks. So.
In Innovate, we have just implemented a remote policy. We are piloting it. My team is part of it. My team has the customer experience and also the complaints management part. And I have to admit that I was a bit concerned on the complaints management part, where we have certain times and anyway we need systems and so on. My surprise was big, very big, I would say, because first of all, everybody asked for it, to be able to work remote. But when we have it, it was not such a big crowded agenda on that. So people chose on their need to work from home, but they didn't exaggerate it. Then the productivity of their job was high. They were in a quiet environment, in a comfortable one. They didn't lose, at least in Bucharest, it could take you even more than 1 hour to the work. and somehow they used this time to solve their complaints and this part. I think that somehow, or at least in my team, I can speak from my experience, the fact that we didn't oblige anybody to choose or not remote, so it was their choice. We just created the opportunity, helped them a lot. And I don't impose to work remote. And here, of course, I have a question also related to this flexible workspace, because sometimes people need their place, a small one, but to be their own one. So somehow probably here it depends, and also it depends on the type of work. I suppose that the game workers, we have a company next to our head office that are creating, yes, you know very well, create games on computer, and I saw them always on the balcony. So I don't know when they are working, so probably they don't need it. Anyway, it will not be the case of my team, this is for sure, but the idea is to be on the table, to have this choice. And it was difficult. In a bank it's very difficult to work remotely. We don't use cloud, we don't use a lot of things, we are scanned from the top to the bottom, so it's very complicated. But when it was on the table, everybody was very, very happy with that.
I think from the motivational psychology perspective, whatever of these tools you're going to implement, for sure, if you have a large pool of people, 1/3 will enjoy it. 1/3 will be okay, 1/3 hate it. That's just the way it is in general. I mean, like, there are people who are high in affiliation, as we call it in our terms. If they value teamwork, if you want to send them home and work from home, they're gonna die sooner or later. They want to have interaction every day, they want to talk to their colleagues, they want to gossip, they want to smoke cigarette in the breaks. And there are people with low affiliation, like I humble myself, who doesn't care. I mean, I'm also in home office for the last 20 years basically, and I love it. And if I have to go to work every day and sit on meetings, I would cut my wrist. So there's a lot of individualization in this case, but I think if you have a larger workforce, it's an obligation that you provide opportunities, because likely there will be one segment of the workforce who is going to leave if you don't give. But I love your example, because if you give it, you have a choice, and then there's no more complaints. And then whoever wants to have it can have it, and that's it.
I have a question in this respect, and it's for you. So when companies, it's for you, Christoph, yeah. So when companies, because it's linked with the question of Diana, when companies come and say, okay, we want this kind of redesign or this new office and so on, do they take into account a sort of employee opinion on how the work should be done, what are their needs, or how this decision-making process is done?
Well,
Do you feel everyone?
I was going to say, because yes, the topic is that it's a customization of the future space according to each company. Each company has different ways of working, has different type of people. So an in-depth study needs to be done, and we call that workplace consultancy. And our team is working with their clients in order really to go through a process of asking the leaders of the teams, talking for their employees, doing surveys with the employees, in order really to understand how they are structured, how do they work, what are their even personalities, there is a survey to do, how do they use their workstation. So all that is really studied in order to do a first idea of how the space should be designed, but in terms of space planning, and how should it be used, what should be workstations that are used maybe by 3 persons, because they are going all around the country. I mean, I have here our head of design. If time allows, like, we could give the mic 2 minutes to Andre to say, because he's performing workplace consultancy, and he's done it for large firms in Romania, and he can tell us what he's done. He's done it also for our office in Bucharest. Go on, Andre.
Yes, thank you, Christoph. I would rephrase a little bit, because I heard a lot of talk about happiness, and this is one thing that we're now all gathered here and we're talking about happiness and sadness, and it sounds like an A meeting, but in fact this is something that is actually real. And if you define what actually means for someone to be happy, and we saw the presentation of Tamas, and we discussed about well-being, basically well-being, what it means safety. And safety is given by comfort. And this is the main reason why someone chooses to actually work from home. Every single one of us knows why they personally want to work from home. But the question is, why would they be in the office? And Tamás touched on these points also, with a lot of knowledge that Staircase is providing with their studies. Working in an office environment is indeed creating communities and bringing people together to solve problems. Also, for some of the companies that try this working from home, they personally found out that more than 3 days working consecutively at home makes them not be part of that community. And this in the end translates to the space. So if you have people coming to work and it's because of they need to meet each other, then you have to prepare the space for this type of activities. But again, it really depends on the companies, their profile, their specific activities. You cannot say from tomorrow we will have work from home. It might not work, and it will definitely not work without having a proper strategy in place, from consulting the people that actually will benefit from this, to have the space prepared and all the logistics, because space means, yeah, you have space, Tamás mentioned, you have technology, you need to be able to provide the necessary technology to work remote, and also to have the buy-in of the people, according to each and every type of activity that they have there. And one more thing, because we talked about happiness, I would just touch really quick about emotion and feeling, because these are things that really influence us a lot. One is for a brief period of time and it's really intense, and usually that is something that we react really quick to that. And the other one is something that takes place for a longer period of time and is strongly related to culture. So the question is, when you prepare a space or you prepare an environment for a person, are you aiming for feelings or for emotions? And that is something that you should also, when you are thinking about retention and also attraction, what elements are, or which one of these two are you thinking about? Because these are, we are talking so general now, but all these affect the environment, even if it's built or if it's just made by people. And I will just give a short example so you understand what I mean. There are a lot of office spaces that are really nice designed, but after some time people realize that they don't work. And they don't work because they have this wow effect, but the wow effect wears off after some time, and because everything that is new is interesting and people will use it because it's new and they need to try it out. But then they will see if they really need it, so they won't actually be using it if it's not something that they need. But things can be trained, and because of everyone is afraid of change, you shouldn't be learning or teaching someone to unlearn something. They should learn always new things, so that they understand that if there is a change happening, there is something that they will get.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a question on the WhatsApp group. Thank you very much. It's from Alexandra, and I think it's related with this diversity. So you said before that it's quite complicated. Does it go back to good leadership, to good management, to what?
Yeah, I completely believe so, because in literature sometimes we overestimate the power of C-level, the CEOs, and we underestimate the power of the supervisors, the ones who are on the line. So I think when I was talking about these 4 basic competencies, this has to go especially for the supervisor, because we often forget that people living those cultures, not necessarily because the CEO, but because of the immediate supervisor. And I think communication and all those elements are way more important in the direct line supervisor. That's why we see sometimes, people who have basically no communication skills fantastically operating on the top end, but the ones who are on the field are dying without it. So I think that that's absolutely a universal solution which we can tell that, okay, this is likely going to also motivate individuals in the manufacturing industry. Other than that, of course, you have to see case by case, because you have to understand of exactly what is the cause of the set. We also do a lot of motivational studies, because of course turnover is pretty much to do with all the things which we've been discussing today. If people do not feel themselves in that culture, the way how they receive motivation, how their bosses are alienating them, they're going to leave. So what we do, we do a survey and we see that, okay, this is this group who is there, and who is there who is leaving after a year, or there's a group who is there in 5 years, and we compare the data between these two groups. And then we can see that what actually keeps people in that environment, and of course that helps also the decision to hire whether those individuals are fitting into that group of people who are staying longer with the company. It just makes our job easier, actually, that we are having people who, let's not forget, it has to be a win-win game. It's win for us, but win for them as well, and that's the only way to make that happen.
So again, we go back to the selection, good selection criteria to have the right people, and then to develop the people skills of these first line managers or supervisors. That would be some practical idea. So actually, I think we go back to the Hawthorne effect of the importance of the human factor. Juana.
We don't have production, the real one, but we have a call center, which is somehow a service production. And again, something real that was happening in our call center team. So we had a very big turnover. We have our call center in Iași. It's a big competition in Iași, as you may know. And we had huge turnover. It's very difficult to prepare a call center agent for banking services. They are very complicated. We have a lot of systems, so it's a nightmare. And how my colleagues succeeded to half on the turnover in the call center, so somehow a production, they created, so we don't have yet a flexible work environment, so we didn't have the chance to move from the current location, and we didn't have flexible tools in that part, but we created some other things. So we have a relaxation room with games and so on, and this part creates because a call center agent cannot talk with the colleague, so they can socialize between themselves, and they cannot know themselves. And I suppose that also in the production is the same thing. If you have an automated process, you cannot leave your place. So they were somehow very creative, and they tried to create small events. And they created those small events with the call center agents. Usually the call center agents are students, are very young persons. They were very creative, and somehow they make these links between themselves. So this could be something that worked for us. And also the engagement, we have engagement polls, and also the engagement was higher after 6 months. So this was the time that took to us to stabilize the situation.
Any other question from the audience? Yes, please. We have there, David.
I think for every leader, retention is a very important aspect, and I would like to come back to that a little bit. And more often than not, I hear during interviews that people leave their current jobs due to lack of development opportunities. But I think they think of that more often than not in terms of I didn't get promoted, or there weren't any, available positions for me to be promoted into at my current job, and I want to go to the next one, and I expect to be promoted fast. And I think these expectations are not aligned with the reality because of the lack of self-awareness, for instance, and also because of the fact that these real conversations between them and their current leaders are not taking place very often or are not honest enough. And I think this should happen more and more if we want to retain our employees. So it needs to be also enabled by the leaders, but also coming from the employees themselves to their leaders and initiate these types of conversations. Because there is a lack of ownership of their roles, and they don't think enough about, okay, what can I do to transform the way I work, to become an engaged person if I like the culture of the organization I'm currently working for example. But I would like to hear your thoughts on that as well. And I was also wondering about how can we really foster creativity in this Romanian culture, because I feel like for us it's even more difficult than for companies in other Western countries where they have better education systems that foster creativity from a very young age. And the majority of us go directly from studying at university into the working environment, whereas in most Western countries people take gap years or travel more in order to figure out a bit better what they want to do and go perhaps to a better suited job in the first place, whereas we tend to jump from one company to another before we can actually figure out what is best for us. Thank you.
That's a very large and very interesting topic. So actually there are two, if I understand correctly. You want to hear some insights upon this comment of some employees saying, I leave the job because I don't have enough opportunities to develop. And this development means also to have meaningful conversation with their bosses. So actually it links back to the talent management, performance management. How does it happen? It's just 1 year event or more. And second part is, can we foster a culture of creativity, but widely at a national level? Not only, it has to do probably with our culture in this part of the world that is more concentrated toward controlling, but let's hear your
Thank you for your question. It is indeed a very complicated topic, but I think I want to split it a bit between kind of the individual contributor, the candidate, and the leader. Because when they say there are no leadership positions, they usually mean a management position. What we've noticed in the organizations we work in Bucharest, they're beginning to have a lot of high potential programs. So basically identify high potential people in their organization and try to explain them that and try to grow them, but not defining leadership as just a management role. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. You can become a leader by becoming an expert in your field. We have organizations where a leadership position means mentoring. So basically they take on a mentoring role, they mentor others, but they don't have a team right then and there. So basically creating that kind of culture where leadership is not equal a management role, provides them with more opportunities, with more ideas on how to grow and which path to take. Connected to this is kind of, you need prepared leaders to make that happen. And having prepared leaders is a topic that we have investigated thoroughly. We often collaborate with our partners from academia because they are also a great source of knowledge. And what we've learned through our studies is also that one of the biggest components for early career leaders or for first-time managers, it's the coachability part. So you, sometimes, and I think my colleagues have emphasized that, what brought you there, so what gave you performance, what made you a great performer, might not help you in a leadership position. Whether it's a management role or just kind of an expert, you need different skills. Some of you mentioned kind of people skills, others mention other type of skills, but what's important is, and our partners from CNSPA, the Faculty of Management there, they have a research center on management, and they said it's very important that the leader leader is coachable. It's very important that the leader is open to learning more and adding and developing those abilities. When leaders learn and they're coachable, it's so much easier for them to turn around towards their team and kind of help them grow and see leadership from a different angle. So I think that covers at least the part of it.
Thank you. Any other comments on the
A
question?
little bit from a different approach. I do not like generalization again, but I have to. Again, we have another buzzword in HR in the last 10 years is Generation Y and Z and blah, blah, blah. If you look into it, there are not much differences between generations. Tamás is a great example, you might want to share that later on. Nevertheless, we see one unification element and I think this is the workforce you're generally talking about. Seems like the millennials have three major drivers. One of them is recognition, the second is affiliation, which is teamwork, and the third is hedonism. This seems to be universal around the globe. And recognition would also mean that I'm working with projects that are visible and I'm advancing. So this is there in the DNA. In the age of narcissism, this is it. This is what's happening. And I think this is fine in one end. On the other hand, and I think this is where the whole question lies, likely in the previous workplace where these guys left, somebody promised them to be there. So here you go again, the fourth basic lines of integrity being one. If somebody lied to them basically, or not evaluated the situation the best way, but in the end of the day they didn't deliver, they left. So I think it's still better to have an honest conversation of what are the ways which you can influence also your career in this company more better. It's a rude one, it's a direct one, but it's still better for a long term to really face this challenge at the interview and not say just for sake of it, because what I'm seeing it happening many times, more than that, because I think what I said about these three major movers, hedonism, affiliation, and recognition is not a big deal, everybody understands. When you see employer branding programs, basically all of them are talking about these three elements. That's okay, but when the candidate arrives at the first place, and they see a very boring place when everybody's looking at the wall, it's not a good sign. So I think you have to promise, you have to deliver the promise basically.
So it's also important to focus on employer branding from internal perspective. What
Yeah.
is its model
Really
within
promise
your
what you can
organization.
really
Yes. Okay. Okay.
So if I may as well, when you asked the question, I was a bit short as well. So I was wondering what drives the promotion, whether it's the recognition, whether it's the money, or whatever piece. But the way I see organizations is that they used to be very hierarchical. Now, very much organizations are matrix, but we are more moving towards network and fluid type of organizations where the leadership positions will be completely changing. It's not going to be one CEO and it's not going to be his direct reports anymore, but this is going to be changing in a lot of ways. And I think when it comes to leadership, flattening the organization is going to be important and making it a more fluid organization. And let me tell you a story. It's a German company that I was hearing about. So picture a huge German company. There is the CEO, and guess what? There are two different buildings. Of course, leadership and key areas like HR, finance are sitting in one building. Across the street, there is another building where all the other regular employees are sitting. There is a canteen for the regular employees, and there is, of course, a difference, not even a canteen, a restaurant for the leadership. So here comes this new CEO who says, well, it's all nice, but we are working in silos and I gotta change this. And of course, I'm a good leader, so I'm leading by example. I will not use the restaurant in our building. I will go across the street and sit with the employees. So the first day he goes to the restaurant and then he sits at the table. And then everyone is looking around. Wow, what is he doing here? He got lost. Why is he here? And then of course the CEO was having his lunch alone. The next day he says, well, okay, I get it. I'm the CEO, so people don't want to come to me. If they don't want to come to you, I will come to me, I will come to them. So the next day, he picks a table where people are already sitting and there is one empty space and he sits there. Guess what's happening? Everyone is afraid, like, whoa, we gotta finish the lunch fast. We gotta go home or gotta go back to work because this is gonna be difficult for us. So the reason why I'm saying this example, that this is really showing how big the distance can be between the top guy and then the regular employees. And that is why I think where the future is heading is a more flat organization where leadership positions are fluid and they are changing, and anyone can be a leader, as Sylvia was saying. And in reality, I think that's why I should not be concerned that I'm not a leader today as a title, because I will have leadership opportunities within the organization. That's my vision, and time will tell if I'm right or wrong.
Okay, I think that's a very interesting comment from 2 points of view. One is because you mentioned that the distance towards power, and in ex-communist countries it's bigger, the distance. So maybe that's one of the answer to your question, why people do not have sometimes the courage to be creative, because creativity means also to have the courage to be vulnerable. If my idea is not the best and I'm going to be criticized, then it's not going to be very okay. And then the story is, it's really, really nice modeling what it means, the culture on the walls, what we claim and what is happening in reality. Well, I think it was a very vivid conversation. Anything that you would like to add, each of you, in 20 seconds? Any important key message that you would like the audience to leave with? Okay, I think everything was said, or maybe in a nutshell, something important about leadership, engagement, recruitment, retention, workspace, anything that you think that might be interesting to keep in mind for the future of the organizations?
Well, I think I already said enough and very detailed, so I can only say enjoy lunch.
Okay.
So great
That's
to
an
meet
important
you. Great
message.
to meet you, and hopefully we'll see each other soon.
Yeah. Okay.
It was great meeting you, and thank you for the insight. Thank you.
I'm gonna be a bit longer just to keep you away from lunch. As I said in my introductory speech, I really loved you as an audience, so thank you very much for being a super active audience. And my advice would be that, after people, it's most of the time the office space which is the biggest cost item in the balance sheet. But don't consider the office as a cost, because it is an enabler. If you create the right environment, then you can attract and retain the talents, and you can build your brand, and you can collaborate better, you can be more competitive, and you can be a leading organization that you would like to be. So thanks very much, and enjoy lunch.
Christoph, any last thoughts?
Okay, well, Tamas, you said it all about the work we do, and if there is one thing, because we have HR population and managers in our audience today, it is indeed nowadays our employees' time, and that should be indeed our focus. If we want to attract them and retain them, we have to study them and to really understand them deeply in order to build the proper environment for them. It's a really customization work. It's much more than before. You have to think about your office much more than before, but this is the work. So people is now the focus, and that would be my conclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being involved. For everybody who resisted, now it's the rewarding time, so you have the lunch time.